The first and maybe greatest challenge to any 9-year-old roaming Johto for the first time, the normal type gym leader, Whitney. I'm even repping Whitney with these orchid colored dragon sleeves, but unfortunately they're black on the inside, so you don't really get the pink bleed through that I was hoping for to represent her gym and her Pokemon, especially her ace, Miltank, that we can see pictured here. We're going with the Miltank from Aquapolis, primarily for its equivalent of Rollout, which is Continuous Tumble, which can deal massive amounts of damage as long as you're good at flipping coins and hitting heads. To pair with Miltank, we also have Tauros from the Legendary Collection, a card that I've been talking about a lot lately actually, and the fun retaliation builds you can do in base Fossil, centering around its Rampage attack. Next on the Pokemon side of things is Jigglypuff from Skyridge. I specifically chose this one just because for 1 energy you can heal up Jigglypuff, and for 2 energy the defending Pokemon is automatically asleep after dealing 10 damage. It's a decent 2 energy colorless attack, especially if you are attaching that second energy on the same turn that you are evolving up into Wigglytuff, because you can attack with Do the Wave. One of my favorite attacks, though it has been drastically depowered from its Jungle Wigglytuff version. You do have to flip a coin in order to land this attack, which I hate, but if it does fire off, you're going to be dealing 10 damage times the number of Pokemon you have in play, and it's going to be pretty easy to fill up your bench because all of these decks are running Pokemon Fan Club, as well as plenty of draw support and plenty of Pokemon. Next up is Clefairy from Expedition, and it's going to be evolving up into the Clefable from Expedition, which is just an all-around great support Pokemon for any decks that are using a bunch of basic energy. Again, this Clefairy has a 1 energy attack that automatically puts the opponent to sleep, which helps you stall out until you get that second energy attached, which you may be doing because Clefable is a decent 2 energy attacker as well, but mainly you're going to be using its Moonlight Pokepower to trade a card in your hand for a basic energy card out of the deck. As any colorless deck in Neo on wood, we do use special energy. We can take full advantage of most of the special energy on offer, but there are also plenty of basic energy cards in this deck, and Moonlight is a great way to thin your deck out a little bit, making sure that your next turn's draws are going to be a little bit better. You're getting the fast energy out of your deck, maybe putting some tools you're going to need later in the game back into your deck, and just allowing yourself to draw into them later using any of the search and draw tools we have. For those, we of course have the full playset of Pokemon Fan Club. I don't think there's a single theme deck I'm going to put up here that doesn't have a full playset of Pokemon Fan Club. It's too good not to use. But for the draw power, I thought of going with Mary, because Mary's based in Goldenrod City with Whitney. Radio Tower's right there. But Mary is also a card that I really like, though I recognize it's not as good as other forms of draw power like Bill or Bill's Teleporter. I wanted an excuse to use it, and here it is. So a full playset of Mary. Couple copies of Copycat just in case your opponent is getting some card advantage on you. You kind of level out the game by getting the exact same hand size that they have. 3 copies of Professor M just for a little additional draw support. With 18 Pokemon in the deck, Master Ball is more than likely gonna hit one of those cards, and because of Wigglytuff's Do the Wave attack, you do want to find Pokemon easily, especially those Miltanks and Tauros, just so you can retrieve them from your deck, instantly play them on your bench, power up Wigglytuff's attack. So 3 copies of Master Ball. There are other Ball Engine cards I could have slotted in here, but I just thought that Master Ball was the most efficient for actually just picking out a Pokemon without having to go too hard into Apricorn Engine, because that doesn't really work for decks that have multiple evolution lines. A couple copies of Strength Charm just to get those little extra chips of damage off whenever you're just short of getting a KO. I will say, do not attach Strength Charm to your Pokemon that you're having to flip a coin to see if the attack is even going to happen. Save it for attacks that are 100% going to land on your opponent, that way you're not wasting it. As for healing up and depriving your opponent of KOs, we also have a couple copies of Super Scoop Up and 4 copies of Goldberry. Goldberry is another one of those cards. It's just too good to not have a playset in every Neo on deck. Miltank and Tauros aren't as bulky as you think they would be. They are a little lower on the HP side, nowhere near being big basics, and so you do have to mitigate some of the chip damage they're going to be taking early game with a full playset of Potion. Though it can be counterproductive with Tauros' Rampage attack, you do want to ensure that you actually get 3 energy attached to it and that you're able to get off a big Rampage. That's kind of going to be your big energy attack for this deck, because otherwise you're really only attaching 1 or 2 energy, stalling out with sleep, hoping it lasts from turn to turn so that you can get in this chip damage. One thing the normal type is kind of lacking in Neo on is a game-winning card that you can kind of slap down onto the board and be an immediate threat to your opponent. Much like Whitney in-game, you kind of have to rely on some gimmicks in order to gain the upper hand on your opponent, which is putting them to sleep and then just racking up damage, putting those stacks down on Pokemon as quickly as you can while keeping yourself from being knocked out by just gorging yourself on all that moo moo milk, which comes in the form of Goldberry and Potion in this case. For special energy supports, we have Recycle Energy, which is always going to come back to your hand. It's going to provide Colorless Energy, which this deck can function purely off of Colorless. Got a couple copies of Warp Energy just to help get around those retreat costs on some of these heavier Pokemon. And then a couple copies of Cyclone Energy as well, because who doesn't love some gusting effects at the right time as needed per matchup. And if those tactics are not your thing, Whitney does have some options for swapping out, trying out different strategies, though they're kind of hit or miss. Mostly miss in my opinion, but let's take a gander. We have access to Dodrio, but we've already used both Dodrios in the Faulkner deck. Gloom isn't quite on theme, but there is Stantler. It's another basic normal type with very mid HP. The Genesis version can deal some decent chunks of damage with Stomp, while potentially building up to a Mystifying Horns to both deal damage and continue to stall your opponent with Confusion. But in terms of both stall and damage, I like the Revelation Stantler much more. With Terrorize, you can completely shut down your opponent's basic Pokemon, for a turn at least, and if they don't evolve it. So very situational, but Overhead Toss dealing 30 damage for 3 colorless is not bad, though you do risk damaging one of your own benched Pokemon. I think just by looking at both of these Stantler you would realize why I didn't include them in the Whitney deck. I should mention that there is a tankier version of Miltank from Genesis that's even got a little Tauros poorly photoshopped in the background there, but it's got 70 HP rather than 60. For 1 energy, it can heal itself a little bit, but its damage output isn't as good. Expedition Tauros looks cool, and it can be a bit of a haymaker card, dealing 30 damage for 2 colorless. Both of those attacks have their own price, though. You either have to flip a coin just to have the attack land, or you have to deal damage to yourself, which you can mitigate with the playset of potions we have in this deck, so Tauros may be a solid swap-in option. You may also choose from the Wigglytuff of both light and dark, though I don't particularly like either of them, especially compared to the E-card Wigglytuff. Light Wigglytuff lets your opponent accelerate just as fast as you two, so it's not very useful, especially in this Whitney deck. Dark Wigglytuff can wombo combo into itself, but you do need 3 turns of setup to get there. And then the payoff's not going to be that great because Wigglytuff only has 60 HP, so it's not really going to last in the active spot for very long. And then lastly, we have Persian to talk about, which I really wanted to include in this build because Persian never gets good cards. Name a good Persian card. Go. You can't. Someone in the comments will definitely leave a good Persian card that I'm forgetting, but that's okay. I like to be wrong sometimes. Available in Neon, we do have Dark Persian from Legendary Collection, which can gust for 1 energy, but only off of a coin flip, and Poison after chip damage for 2 energy. Really, the best thing Dark Persian has going for it is that it can attack for 2 energy and then free retreat to the bench. Skyridge Persian is much better. It keeps the free retreat, but gets 10 more HP. Surprise Slash is gonna deal 20 guaranteed damage for 2 energy, and off of a coin flip, potentially disrupt your opponent's hand. Lunge, on the other hand, has a 50% chance of dealing 50 damage, which is the only reason it wasn't included in the build, is because I hate flipping coins like this. But it is easy to set up, easy to get out of the active position if you need to, so if you want a potential haymaker card in your Whitney build, I'd say Skyridge Persian might be the way to go. And that's the Whitney build. As always, let me know down in the comments what you think of this theme deck. Let me know what Pokemon you would swap in. Did I overlook some obvious strategies here? Was this theme deck truly befitting of the cutie from Goldenrod City? Stay tuned for plenty more theme decks that will be releasing periodically throughout the summer. Thank you so much for watching. Social media links are in the description. Goodbye.